Yeah. So what we're looking at, in my opinion, is different views of theology. And if we take it to a deeper level and we analyze it from a rational point of view, rather than having the early concepts that were based on sort of integrating some of the Stoic Roman ideas, we can have more of a sort of deep understanding that, well, maybe this was actually planned. Maybe we're meant to grow and become more rational and think and develop and create more out of our society and humanity than, well, just blaming each other. So that's chapter 1. So as we go through this, I'll go through each of the chapters. I basically go through all of these in sort of looking at, well, the Greco-Roman, then analyzing the Hebrew stories, it's a little bit of the Kabbalic area as well, some of the other related Asiatic cultures, looking at more of the development of a structured state, etc., and continue from there.
Thank you very much, Craig. Kevin has a question for you.
Certainly.
I actually didn't have a question. I was clapping. That was the reaction.
Oh, is it a clap? Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was a clap. Yeah.
Excellent.
Sorry. It was a great
I have a
presentation.
question. I
Yes,
have a
please
question
do.
if you don't, Kevin. Right. So it seems to me that the story of both Pandora and Eve is to try to paint the woman as the bad apple and the woman who brings down humanity and mankind. But as per your chapter, which I do agree with, is that without the women and such, which they actually lead humanity to God's true path, because what man without woman would just be a docile man thing. Just
I don't even know docile. I'd probably argue some ape with a club thumping each other.
yeah, just in the garden still, picking fleas off each other, for all as we know. But as we had like Eve and Pandora introduce a little bit of chaos, but also drive humanity to work, and through the work and hard achievements, gain knowledge and information, we grow as a society. And it's actually women who have led the change. It comes from that saying, behind every great man is a great woman. That comes to mind. But it seems that, but really the portrayal is that it's thanks to women who have been the great thinkers and the leaders in knowledge towards that side. I mean, that just seems the hidden story behind the front story.
That was one of the parts I took away from it, which is the blaming of sort of, well, sitting there and blaming Eve. Well, for what? For making us do things. And I know for a fact, personally, that I'm more productive because of my wife, and she enables my life. And different people have different ways of looking at this, and but it also is into the very nature of how we are. It doesn't mean just the man does something, just the woman does something, but we form couples and alliances and groups, and we create more. But in society, we developed more than just sitting around and, as you were saying, picking fleas. If we look at some of the works of Michelangelo, some of the sculptures, if you actually examine them in detail, they're amazing. The level of sort of intricacy he went into. There are individual muscles that are captured in some of these things. I mean, there are like when you move your pinky, there are tendons in your arm that move, and he has these represented differently. And to go into that level of detail is remarkable and shows what we as humans can do. And sitting there tending the garden going, oh, it's nice, and being basically a bunch of people doing nothing forever, well, pass.
Yeah, it's it also, the story that I seem to get from it as well is that what God's purpose. You mentioned God's purpose and the unfathomable being that he is. Some theorize that his purpose is that humans gain knowledge and gain information for themselves, and without the driving force of these stories like Pandora or Eve. And in as other cases, I think of the story of Troy, where there's always a woman. They seem like they seem to be made out as some kind of the weak link, but they're not really. Anyway, my point is that God's purpose seems to be a drive towards knowledge and information, and it's
rather than just giving it to us, we have to earn it. So something earned has value, something given doesn't. If you think about it for a moment, when you strive for something, when you do something, when you study hard and you work, it matters. But if someone gave you a honorary doctorate, does it matter so much? I mean, it looks nice and you can flout around and you can go, oh, isn't that pretty? Look, I got a piece of paper.
That's crap. Archie, you have a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask, staying on the topic of the knowledge, just as a less abstract knowledge, abstract, but the good and evil, I think just less abstract the fire itself as being representation. So you think about this, if the knowledge of fire and our knowledge of how to control it, in one sense that could give us some sort of dominion, and it gives us power. And with power is responsibility as well. And then with power, once we learn how to use fire, we can do all kinds of mistakes, and which lead to bad things. Even be tempted by the evils. Now that I have this power and I'm jealous or I don't like my neighbor, well, I have this power to burn down his house. But in the end, second, third order effects, because our rationale is bounded to, that's going to be evil in the end. As just that, giving humans the knowledge of fire, and that power, just also leading to like the idea of the stewardship again. And then other questions too, like for me, the fire seems like logical. Why do you think it was an apple or a forbidden fruit chosen to represent the knowledge in that story? And then in other stories, why do you think it's so common to choose a ring as the object that represents, power?
It's interesting, the difference there. In a lot of other more warrior cultures, rings are generally given in multiple ways. It's not always a ring on the finger either. It could be something like a torque or like an armband, etc. But generally speaking, especially if you look at the Nordic sort of mythologies, Odin, Woden, etc., the ring was quite often an arm ring. We don't think of it that way now, but it signified like binding and vassalage. So in doing that, you gained power, but you also subscribed to something. You became a vassal in a way. So you might have been a vassal of a god, but you became when you were an avatar of something, you became something of something else. You gave up part of yourself to get that power. So that's an interesting other aspect. Whereas the apple, you actually become more. You're not taking and you're choosing to build yourself into more. So it's a very different aspect of how that works.
The binding, that's good. I need to look up vassal, but also I was thinking just the opposite of the binding, and as you were speaking today, too powerful. And so Zeus when became too powerful, and then he split him in two. Is that also an idea of the distribution power, and especially maybe the Greeks, that was one of the beginnings of those thoughts as well?
In part of the problem was also that Zeus knew that he would eventually be replaced, and like he replaced the Titans, and the Titans replaced the elder Titans. There was a idea that he wanted to, well, keep going forever and never lose his position. And in that, he basically caused sort of changes that Prometheus knew would actually lead to his doom. So Zeus, in sort of how he tried to stop sort of the next generation of whatever replaced the gods, actually created a scenario, ironically, that would lead to his own doom. But one of these funny little things that happen.
Do you think that, so I wrote down another question when you're talking about Prometheus and being omnipotent. And if you knew it was going to happen to you, would you choose to? But does being omnipotent take away free will? Because it almost going to put you in a loop of regress. Like, well, if I choose this, then I know it not. If I then I don't, it kind of takes away your ability to choose if you know.
Well, I've written a paper, Prometheus Choosing to be Bound, and the reason I did that was, I mean, if we look at Prometheus, it's he actually chose the outcome. So he knew what was going to happen, and he had the opportunity to avoid it. He could have avoided being captured by Zeus. He could have avoided many things. And he actually chose, knowing the pain that he would sort of suffer for literally eons. But he also knew that he would be freed. So I don't know if I'd want to, though. I mean, it's a hard decision. Hey, you're going to suffer for 50,000 years. But it's okay. Everything will be after that great.
Hey, Craig, so it's Dale in Melbourne. It sounds like what you've chosen this pathway. Really awesome. So great to hear these gnarled roots. I remember you sent it to me many years ago, and now it's like it's all making some kind of sense. So right now I'm studying the human body through movement, and the method is by a man named Moshe Feldenkrais, who's got some really great books also, which I recommend. Elusive Obvious is one, very dense writing. But what I love about this work is that the differentiation, which is what I'm hearing through what you spoke about this morning, this ability for people to choose, for humans to choose. And the one thing that separates us is the human nervous system. So our nervous system enables us to choose and it's like reaching, we connect through our nervous system. So this ability to make choices is also free will, what separates us from animals. So he's really big on what makes us so different. And I heard a lot in what you said this morning, or for me, my morning. It's like the development of consciousness The woman, like the sacrifice, is like she was chosen as what could be the sacrificial lamb. In would her choice be the end of her or the beginning? So she was chosen to as an example for what would happen, and like out of it choice came. And yes, and everything you're saying about our ability to grow and to develop and to connect, to build. So what I thought also interesting when you said that many see this ability, like the alchemical shift into building metals, but so I'm just emptying my head, but it seems like that enabled us from a conscious level.
Even if we
able
go into the concept of birth, many women continue to have children after their first child, when you know that you're going to suffer pain and you're going to knowingly sort of suffer. Well, these days, of course, we can have epidurals and all the rest, but there are plenty of people around the world, especially those in like Africa, South America, etc., who continue to have children and knowingly know that they will suffer and choose. So,
well, it seems like God wanted to share the load. It's like share this ability to create and to respond. And this is also something interesting about the nervous system. It's the ability to respond. So response ability. It's like he's given us an ability to respond to events and to circumstances rather than to react. So that's what the nervous system really enables. It's this way to connect with each other, to respond to the present moment versus to react. And you can feel that also just in the way the nervous system, you can feel it in your body. This like getting hard to, or it's like getting hard or soft to respond to what's going on or to defend and protect. So it's like we have this inner armor within our bodies to pretend or to protect or defend. But Craig, this has been so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing it. This is now, it's like giving me an entry into this world of philosophy, which has been a bit daunting. But now I think I've got an access to it. So thank you very, very much. I'm looking forward to the rest of it.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Because there's not much written about Lilith, and so my question is Eve was seduced by the devil, by Satan, and then and arguably, which I agree with, it was the Guardian's fault for letting it happen. But then she went on to Adam and convinced Adam to eat the apple and so on. But Lilith just didn't obey Adam and was apparently a disobedient wife. I don't know much more of Lilith's story, if there's anything more. Yeah, Lilith is apparently the more evil one. And
yes, I
don't get that.
I mean, the Kabbalic, yeah.
It seems, but am I right in thinking that seems a bit backwards? I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but it's just, okay, to me, it seems backwards. It seems that Lilith was Lilith exercised free choice, free will, because whatever she wanted, whatever, wasn't agreeable. She wasn't being an obedient servant to Adam. And because she exercised free will, she was kicked out of the garden.
Yeah, fairly much. I mean, it's an interesting sort of position, and that you didn't do what your husband told you, and he gets to abandon you. But anyway,
does that seem like, I don't know? In a part, it seems like one of those story stories to try and get women of the time to say, like, obey your husband or you get kicked out, type of thing.
Yes. Yep.
Leslie. Leslie's got a question.
Oh, Leslie.
Oh, yes. Well, I was also going to say maybe Lilith had to go because she wasn't going to pick that apple.
Yeah.
Right. But also, I was wondering, is that negative sentiment of women a remnant of our tribal past? Like, does it precede Greco-Roman mythology?
Some of it, yes, but then it depends on which part of Greco-Roman as well. There are lots of, I mean, there wasn't really a single version of anything with the Greco-Roman. That was one of the more difficult things for people to understand. You have many types of system.
Okay.
I've got a question then. So we're talking about Lilith and Eve, and like Mary was supposed to redeem the Eve story. But what about the hit on Taoism? So how did the Chinese culture see women? Because I know the old, really ancient Indians, they actually revered women. So how did the Chinese see that?
That scenario I've done a little bit of study on, but not enough for, I mean,
Okay.
not enough for me to actually make a comment.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. But am I right in thinking that Virgin Mary, Mary Magdalene was supposed to be very, you know, they were supposed to be redeeming of Eve, but Mary Magdalene was supposed to be Lilith?
Yes,
as well?
there are, yeah, so there are people who argue that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty, I'm going to leave you all in a moment, but I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned something.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Craig. It's been a pleasure.
All right.
And thanks for staying for this extra 20 minutes, everyone.
No problem.
Give
Till
your
next
thanks,
time.
and till
Thank
next
you.
time.
Namaste.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
See you later.
Bye. Yep.
Remember, there's
And I'll-
the extra pages in the philosophy channel, and ask questions about this chapter still. I'm quite curious about some things. I'm very curious. I really think there's a in the mindset, in the abstract mindset, I think there's a birthing of Bitcoin in this, in the creation mythos, in the wording Genesis, in the chaos, you know, realizing that, oh, there's got to be a bit of chaos in the universe, because then that inspires growth, which is the orphans are chaos, and orphaning blocks and is a choice as well. It's every time something gets orphaned, there's a choice, and the blockchain timeline continues on in a certain direction. I would be super interested in a paper like marrying the blockchain universe to our reality. Sorry, I interrupted.
I just posted in the Slack about the I was reading about the Red Queen hypothesis, which Bitcoin uses in terms of proof of work, but it also talks about having different, because like with my plants and stuff, some plants are, you know, asexual. They have both parts and they can just reproduce on their own. But then others, you have to have pollen from one tree and one from another. And so I was studying this a while back, and it all fits into the Red Queen hypothesis, where if you have competing sexes, then it makes the species stronger. And I think this fits into kind of what you're talking about how it fits in with Bitcoin, because it has the Red Queen game is like central to Bitcoin, and why we have proof of work instead of proof of stake. And so that might be worth looking at.
I also did too. I wrote an essay, was Bitcoin divinely inspired?
Yes.
All the other ones reference the same stuff. I referenced the Red Queen game and the proof of work essay, and then game theory. I kept thinking about game theory throughout the entire thing today, and you know, the handicap protocol and everything else too it all ties together.
Sorry, do you think it was that complicated, or do you think it was just like maybe the naming of the Genesis block was simply because in the beginning?
Oh, I think Craig had some a mix between divine inspiration. I think actually, yeah, you put a spot on there, which is if anyone's read about like the infinite intelligence concept, is basically, I'm sure Kevin knows the word there, and it's the basis of where ideas just spontaneously come to you, you know, is a divine inspiration. And I think that Craig had partial study and also divine inspiration in creating it, and certain words, you know, just came to him because of his past history and such, and things like, you know, Genesis block and Genesis and time chain, because it's basically a timeline in what could be argued another dimension, two-dimensional space. Time doesn't have to move the same way here as the same as in another dimension. Time might not move as well. And also it's the way he writes about chaos and how things came from chaos, which is Bitcoin. If you consider, you know, it's just loads of chaos, just numbers running down. If you know, if you've ever seen, you know, when you watch it on what's on chain, transactions happening, it just looks like chaos, but order comes from that chaos.
And it's the same things that bring order to the world are things like the Red Queen game and competition, and you know, game theory. Those theories are observations of what happens in nature, and those bring order to societies and even different species in the world. That's how they procreate, like Kevin was saying, in different ways. And it's the same laws that govern nature are what Dr. Wright put into the design of Bitcoin to govern it. Everyone talks about governance, and he even talks about, you know, being a I can't think of it. I was thinking the other day referencing it, but everything that governs Bitcoin is just an observation of what governs the world and applied into the system, into like a free market system, because it's natural.
Because like biologically inspired was one of the words, or maybe I said that wrong, but in theory of Bitcoin, I think
right.
there was a video. Yeah, biologically inspired. Yeah.
I referenced Dr. Wright saying that he just looked at nature, and him talking about the things of biology, neural networks being like the small world network being like neural networks in that essay when he's talking to Ryan X. Charles. And then also just Spinoza saying, hey, the laws of nature are the same as, you know, the eternal decrees of God, and then tying those two things together. And that was my argument for being divinely inspired. Exactly what you guys are saying.
So the birth of creation, the birth of the cell. The way
Well, have any of you looked at Konstantinos's work? I've forgotten his first name now. Chris, what's his first name?
yeah,
No,
yeah.
what is his first name?
Is his first name.
Santos. Santos is his second name. Yeah, his and Ian Griggs' work on an AI within Bitcoin. Well, not an AI, but simulation of, and you know, basically they've done the basics and they've proved that it is possible. And my personal theory was years ago that yes, this was possible, but if you think about like the creation mythos story, how God came from nothing, and I'm not talking about like creating a god or anything, but I'm talking about the right. So in human society, we have three types of intelligences. So I've got to backtrack a bit to go forward. We have the mechanical intelligence, which is like body and muscle movement, you know, things which come natural, breathing, for example. We have the social intelligence, which is things like books and things we teach each other, passed down generations. And we have abstract intelligence, which is things we think up in our mind, our creation and such like that. And Bitcoin could be seen as the combination, eventually, not yet, the combination of a social intelligence of humanity. Right. So imagine that it's the collective social intelligence of humanity and exists in this two-dimensional existence that is Bitcoin. And that imagine that you could speak to it, you could input. I mean, the thing is, eventually, I do believe you'd be able to speak to it, like an Alexa, or anything else like you talk to, and you will be able to ask it questions, and you will be able to feed input into it as you ask it questions and such. It can tag things and so on, and feed more input back to you. And eventually, after I think actually when it's ready, after a surprisingly short amount of time, it will be like the social intelligence of humanity. And in its own kind of two-dimensional existence, it would be something like a simulation of God. Not God like it can do anything, but God in a omniscience kind of way. And not that omniscient, but it knows everything in the entire thing, but it knows everything of the entirety of humanity. Sorry, go on, Archie.
No, I mean, you're speaking my language. I wrote another essay in the intrinsic value of Bitcoin as an information system, arguing that like a mimetic thing, like what humans do is pass information down. Well, we propagate it down to posterity and to each other. And language itself is just an information system where we have words that represent things, and we have protocols that put them together. And even writing is the same thing. Once written language is just new sets of codes and new sets of protocols that enable us to, collect, store, and transmit information to each other and through time. And then the same thing with the internet itself is just another set of codes and another set of protocols. And then also what you're saying right now, Bitcoin is just the next set of protocols and code. And what the code does is allows us to interface too. We could communicate with each other. Once we could have written language and write it down, then we could interface with information that way. And then the internet, the way we interface with it, and then what you're describing in the AI is also all of this collection of the human information. I believe would be like the canon, is what Dr. Wright would say. And then even Bitcoin is a better way of recording it. And then it's now being recorded on microchips and silicon. And then the ways and with AI is just going to be that much smoother of a way to query the information and to interface with the information. And it's just the next step in the mimetic systems of.
I think as well, to add to what you're saying, is that the economic solution that Bitcoin provides for microtransactions is a key element to building this. Because if you just had an information layer, as we've been discussing, then you've just got the internet, and it ends up a garbled mess and lots of anonymous people and sock puppetry, and the information. Too much information is less information because it becomes shit information. But if you have the microtransactions and able to give value and also represent identities, I mean, that's one concept people misunderstand. They think everyone will be known all the time, but that's not the reality. People will have an identity, and they'll also have many other accounts which are not identified. But if you want to build up a reputation and an identity, then everyone will have the opportunity to do that. And tying microtransactions to a person and also to a I'm going to say AI for want of a better word. It's not an AI, it's a simulated thing. We all know what I mean. Having that able to make transactions and receive transactions will be like the blood of it. We'll keep it alive. It will give it, like we were saying earlier about proof of work, the ability to, it needing to make and give transactions will be its proof of work of being able to power itself, energize itself, its blood flow. And because without it being able to generate money, it will just run dry. It will have no use if people are not using the information database. And I don't think there's just going to be one. I think there's going to be a few, and I think that there will be one dominant one. but there will be quite a few others which might have access to private databases.
Yeah, one thing I just want to add to what you're just saying is that I was thinking about is that the value, it's always humans that are assigning value through their money choice. You know what I mean? If you look at the definition of value, I should pull it up so I don't mess this up, but it's like the amount of money something is worth or something. Yeah, the material or monetary worth of something is one of the definitions. But so if you think about it, you're saying if the AI doesn't give the right answers, it'll run out of money and blood flow and life force. So it's like the humans are the ones that are assigning the money, though. You see what I mean?
Well, yeah, the humans. So it will need humans feeding it. Without humans, it's not going to be a Terminator situation, because without humans, it's going to die and starve itself, and it will never be. I mean, you could have bots which feed other bots, but at the end of it, there's always going to be human along there somewhere asking the bots. So, and one of the things that I think, though, that we will be in competition with down the line is that people will try, with all this anarchy and anon stuff, they will try to make things and pretend things are completely powered without human interaction, and they can just run off on their own. And I do think that's stupid and potentially dangerous, because if you give a bot complete self-control and, you know, run it in a kind of loop thing, then what if something goes wrong or an error or something?
I think that's what Dr. Wright would argue too. It has to be human at the end, because computer programs are recursive. They only end where whoever wrote the program.
Yeah.
That's why he'll say, like, computers can never have agency, because they don't have free will and they don't make a decision. They just reference themselves until they get to the base code of whatever a human programmed it to do. But that it learns from humans in the monetary system too. In the economic system, monetary systems are also information systems, because the price of any good and service itself is information, and it's a signal that we receive about, like, the supply and demand. But also the other thing about information too is people purposely distort it and misconstrue it for whatever reasons too. And that's a problem with storing information, but the Bitcoin is an integrity machine for that you're speaking to as well, Joel.
I want to add to that as well. It doesn't just have to be information with where we're going. Something Leslie was asking about the other week in Slack was about how it can help with taxes and just basically your business, all the paperwork and stuff in the background. I don't know. I'll have to ask you in PMs if is Craig been good with following up on you, because I want to chase that up. But basically, I'll pass over to you in a sec. But it can be used efficiently for things like Leslie needs, and it could get fed money in transactions that way. And the people who've designed it can also get fed split transactions and be paid and monetized off that way. Sorry, over to you, Leslie.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, I emailed him and basically just said what I had mentioned in Slack about the business, because we need something that integrates and gets all the different systems talking to each other. Another thing that's really annoying is business insurance, and that takes hours of our time trying to extract all of the information, line it all up, and then hand it over to the insurance company. And it would be nice to have compiled data that from, maybe on the blockchain, that we can just hand over to them and remove that hassle. But it also has to be cost effective. So some of the systems we use are through Moraware. I don't know if you've heard of it. You kind of have to be in our business to know what it is, but it's like they have different quoting software. And so you subscribe to that, but then you get, limited number of subscriptions. So all of these costs add up. So I have been asking them, and I'm starting to talk to someone with their supply chain department at nChain. And he says that there are cost-effective ways of doing it, but we're still in the really early stages. So it's to be continued. I'll let y'all know.
Okay. Yeah.
But I hope it helps. Yeah, because you know, with all of these subscriptions, they add up for all of these different things we have to do. And you know, the supply chain has a lot of problems. And it's surprising too. You know, you think some of these large companies have their act together, but once you start working with them, you realize that they have a lot of issues as well. So
yeah, there's that whole area then that can be made more efficient with something being created and just basically crunching the numbers for you as you make transactions, as you deal with people. It just recording the data, but it needs to just record the data in a way on a blockchain where you can then retrieve the data. And I will say that recently I was asked to delete a bunch of stuff Craig uploaded to the Slack over the last few years because they hadn't been painted yet. And some of this was to do with putting information on the blockchain and then retrieving it. So yeah, they're very, but I mean, it's in, you know how Craig does his paintings and stuff, but no one can understand them until it's made a few steps higher. So I don't know how far along it is, but I know that they have, it's on their minds. But I would be very interested in keeping track of it as well and chasing.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to understand as I'm pursuing this is, are we going to find out that Bitcoin needs to be adopted by larger entities first because it's like the trickle down theory of like technology? Or is this going to be able to be something as a smaller business we can adopt and share with other companies, test it out for ourselves, you know, and see if we can get others to connect to it? I don't know. I don't know what it'll look like because I'm not
I don't know either, but my theory is, the way that I've always looked at it is that smaller companies will adopt it first, and then it'll make them so much more efficient, and then they'll become the dominant companies long term. It's kind of like if you're looking at Amazon, and they were one of the first to do e-commerce, and then they grew bigger than Walmart. You know what I mean? And then Walmart's like, oh shit, we gotta figure out this internet e-commerce thing. So that's my theory on it, but I could totally be wrong. So
I think it's whoever makes the software first properly and sells it out to people first. If nChain does it, I'm going to give them a prod and try and say, look, well, you know, use the businesses in the Slack and offer it to them and get it out there. I think it would work better to go to smaller businesses first because they're more inclined to go, yeah, I want to try this. And then bigger businesses will eventually see what they're using and go, okay, we'll adopt it. But bigger businesses like governments and such are slow to adopt.
Governments always last.
Yeah, sadly right. So, yeah. If anyone has any more to add or throw in.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for joining.
And have a good evening, everyone. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.
See you
Thank
again
you.
soon.
Bye.
Bye then.
Bye.